Lights, camera, action. We have a very special guest here today, Matty Libatique, cinematographer extraordinaire, one of the greatest directors of photography I've ever had the chance to collaborate with and work alongside in my capacity. And this is truly an honor. Thank you for coming today, baby.
Well, full disclosure, we're friends, so
we are
thanks
friends.
for the kind words.
And
thanks
we are
for the kind words.
We are friends. On top of that, exactly. So,
what's going on?
Well, let's start off. I don't want to go like into history right now. Let's start off with where you've been at, and we're in the middle of the pandemic. You're home in LA. Everyone's sort of shut down and Zooming in whatever way that they can. I was doing these episodes inside of a podcast studio until this began. What you've been up to and what's going on, and you were able to finish some stuff beforehand. Was there stuff about to start that didn't happen? What's going on in your life right now?
Most recently, a lot of this, man. I mean, I've been doing classes, a lot of zooming around. I've done a few podcasts, but I've taught classes, done some Q&As, moderated a panel. I just been trying to keep busy, stay in it. You spend so much time at the beginning of this. I thought I was on a show. We shut down. We had 3 days left and we shut down, rightly so. And I just, at first I was like, okay, I could kick back. It was almost like the time between Thanksgiving or the time between Christmas and New Year's, where nobody calls and you have time to do whatever you want to do. Start playing chess again, pick up the guitar again, and at first it was great. I was reading, but that lasted about 3 weeks. It might not even have lasted that long, man. I'll be honest with you. And I started to go crazy. I got some gear, I got some lenses, and I started shooting stuff at the house. And nothing really, nothing with any purpose. I was just like doing light studies because I was just trying to, I saw the writing on the wall, and I just said, hey, let's see how fast I could set up a shot on my own. So I started doing that, and then that got tired, and then I just started talking, because you spend so much time alone, not alone necessarily, but at home you have a lot of time to think, and all sorts of shit. You want to apologize to people. You want to write your thoughts down. It's like going to rehab. And it just turned into me being able to share some of my experiences with people, and that's what I've been doing.
And when you started working as a cinematographer, prior to that, as growing up, you had a real background in that got you like engaged in wanting to be a photographer. Was it your dad? Tell me a little bit about that story, about how that all began.
Well, my father, when he got to the States, he immigrated. Obviously, a first-generation Filipino. My parents were immigrated in 1966. My dad's first job is in New York as a lab technician at Berkeley Film Labs, and he was an avid still photographer. And he would take his Filipino friends, and he'd make them wake up at 5 a.m. and try to catch the light on the George Washington Bridge, or at the time it was the Tri-Borough Bridge, and shoot shots of whatever he could in the best light. And I didn't really clock that, until I was about 20 years old, when I started looking at slides, and I found a bunch of slides that he had done. My father passed away at 25, and then I started to pour over some of the things he had done, and a lot of it's landscape, and a lot of it's just sort of city stuff. But he was conscious of light. It's not that, but I don't know. It was, and he taught me the basics of photography in terms of, as a kid. By the time I was 12, I knew, the concept of iris, shutter speed, and focus. But it wasn't something I really wanted to do at that time. I mean, I wanted to be a rock star or a baseball player. You know what I mean? It wasn't until I got into college that I thought cinematography would be a good path.
I love that. And when you, before you went to AFI, you weren't even, you were studying, I guess, some communications, but were you studying to do production at that time in any way at Cal State, or not really?
No, I mean, you know what it was? It's like I was I got, when I was in university, I started as a psychology major, right? But then as I met some people who were interested in film, and there was literally a film club that I joined, and you know, it was on after that. It was like a little bit of a social network of people who had enjoyed films, and you know, it was in college that I saw Do the Right Thing. I saw Spike's Do the Right Thing, and I was instantly transformed into somebody who, you know, it was inspirational. It was a life-changing, inspirational moment at the age of, 19.
And you wanted,
so
you want, then that
changed everything for me.
It kind of drove you. That then was there a break between the two to go to AFI and where things really got ignited, or did you go right?
Well, it took a couple of years after that for me. I mean, no, I graduated, and I didn't get into NYU, and which was disappointing. I mean, I wanted to go to the school that Spike Lee went to, right? But I didn't get into NYU, so I ended up taking an internship after undergraduate school at a company that did short films for Showtime, directed by people who were working professionals. And I just sort of gravitated towards the camera department because that's what I was interested in, really. You know, when I got the bug, I bought a Bell and Howell wind-up camera, and I used an Arri S with the reversible motor, and I started shooting. I wanted to shoot films about petty crimes, thinking that I might be able to submit them to MTV at the time. You know, I was a big pop culture guy, and I'm still a big pop culture guy. And but I realized, you know, when I made a film, I used to work at a Tower Records, and I made a film there. I did 2 days of shooting a film off hours. I mean, Tower Records is famous for being open until midnight. So once midnight happened, I took out the camera and a doorway dolly, and I was doing shots. And I had this actor who I got from the theater department, and I was making this film about a guy who was a shoplifter. And I never talked to the guy. My producer's like, you know, I don't think you're a director. you're a cinematographer. I'm like, and I didn't, you know, that sort of, I mean, literally, it was where I realized that there's a difference. You know, I thought a filmmaker was a filmmaker, but cinematography is its own thing, and that's what I was attracted to.
Well, that's an interesting topic unto itself, because there are so many of your colleagues that have switched into directing but continue to shoot, but that's not something that you wanted to do. You wanted to stay as the director of photography and continue to be the craftsman and stay in that lane, not to get out of that lane. And it was not something that you really wanted to do, right?
Look, I don't have that urge, really. You know, what is it that would drive me to be a director? I don't know what that would be. You know, I mean, I don't have never really had that urge. As soon as I got this inspiration, it's never left me. You know, and all the people who came before me, all the people who have been in my generation, the people behind me, and in more recent generations, it's like you pull from them, and it's like you're trying to forward this craft. And I'm lucky enough to be at a place where I could try to forward that craft. To this day, I just want to forward the craft. I don't want to be complacent, you know. And it's such a noble profession for me. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, we do what we do, and then we walk away from it. And box office doesn't really mean a whole hell of a lot to me. I don't read the trades. You know what I mean? I do what I do. And I love that. There's a freedom to it.
And one of the things that we've never talked about ever before, but I'm fascinated by is, and I don't know.
What haven't we talked about before, Charlie?
There's one
thing. What
thing.
haven't we talked about?
you apparently are a chef, a man who enjoys to cook food, and you have the ability to make some traditional Filipino things and all of that. There's like tell me a little bit about that and about your passion for cooking and I do believe there's a dish that I don't even know what it is. Pinkabet?
Pinakbet.
Yeah, pinabet. Yeah. Explain that to me and what that is and also your Filipino background, because you have sort of a closeness to it that is not really part of the life that you share in your regular life and in your working life.
Well, I mean, I grew up with the food, you know, up until I got into school proper in New York and New Jersey. I was speaking Tagalog. You know, my parents would speak to me that way, and I'd speak it back.
And you learned the language growing up as part of your life.
Yeah, but then as I got into school, you know, it was this interesting thing. It's like growing up in the East Coast. You know how it is. It's like I was called Chinese for you know, first until I was 10 years old. So I was like, you know, damn near the time I left. When my family left the East Coast to come to California, I was called Chinese. And when I got here, it was a different race dynamic, right? But and I didn't live in a Filipino neighborhood. Like when we were in Elmhurst, Queens, where I grew up, where I started, where life began. I was you know, there was some Filipinos, but it was largely it was a populous Asian community, but there was a lot of different, you know, it was Chinese, it was, you know, a lot of Chinese. So that's why I got pegged as a Chinese person, right? And I never really even fought back on it. I didn't know how to. So, but I just held on. I just growing up with the food. It's part of my identity. So growing up and leaving home, and I just wanted to continue to cook it, you know? So I would ask my mother how to cook this, how to cook that. And it's part of our conversations to this day. No, you're doing it wrong. I'm like, I am, but you know, the kids like it, you know. And I remember making there's a dish called arroz caldo, which is kind of like a paella, you know, but it's like chicken, ginger, and rice, right? It's super simple. But I make it more like a paella, and my mother makes it more like a soup. And the traditional way is more like a soup, but I make it like a paella, you know. And it's like I love that. It just because of my experience and the people that are around in my life, it's like it sort of transitions. It's like it's got an evolution. The food has an evolution.
It's a good part of the life, you know. I mean, I'm going to take a bit of a right turn because we always talk and we get caught up in just feature film, but a cinematographer has so many things that they shoot. And one thing that you've done so much of that I have watched a certain amount of over the years, but you don't always point your eyes towards it. So you've done a tremendous amount of music videos and done a lot of work in that, going back all the way to the beginning. Talk a little bit about working in music videos and what that was like for you during there was really more of a heyday at one time in some of the stuff that you were doing at the early portion of the time that you were shooting music videos and what was pouring into those and the creativity that went into that.
Well, I was fortunate to realize when I was I went to the American Film Institute, as you know, met Darren Aronofsky day one.
Yeah.
But when I graduated from AFI, I knew that nobody was going to be chasing me to do a movie. You know, it wasn't going to happen. Like, and if it was going to be a struggle. And I knew that you know, being in Los Angeles, I basically dove headfirst into music videos. And it's funny because when I took that year off between undergraduate school and graduate school, I met these guys at this company I was working at, and they ended up having a contract with Pioneer. Pioneer being the company who did you know, audio equipment and some television equipment, electronics. But they had these laser discs, and we used to make karaoke's. So I would take an Aries, and these two guys who were directing them, we would go to a modeling agent and get, you know, whatever, 4 models. We drive them out to a remote location so they couldn't leave. Everybody was in the same van, and we just shot the shit out of the, we would do like 4 songs in a weekend, which is crazy. But I built a reel out of that, and I just cut my reel. I used to rent 3/4-inch decks and just work on cutting my reel, because I knew that I didn't want to pursue feature films getting out of school, because I didn't think it was going to be a livelihood there. So I just targeted music videos because I had been enamored by it. I was like I said, like, you know, I wanted to present petty crime films to MTV, and MTV was still relevant, and BET became really relevant at the time too. So, you know, I started doing $20,000, $10,000, $20,000, and $30,000 rap videos when I got out. And then that slowly but surely transitioned to working with different directors. And, you know, I never really got, like, when I got out of AFI, I was looking at like Matthew Ralston, you know, I was looking at Josh Taft, I was looking at Kevin Kerslake and Spike Jones and these guys. I never worked with any of those guys. You know what I mean?
Right.
I worked with like Darren Grant and Chris Robinson, Paul Hunter, because that was my generation of people, right? So and Little X, and you know, you name. There's a bunch of guys we were doing, and it was an explosion at that time. And all of a sudden we were going from $25,000 videos. All of a sudden we were doing $500,000 videos, $1 million budget videos. I mean, it was crazy. Like I look back at the time, it was probably the happiest I've ever been. Like I was young, and the world was blowing up, and we would see our work almost immediately on television, and there was a satisfaction to it that I don't know that people get today, because there's a satisfaction to the work, but there's also a satisfaction to people seeing new shit.
Yeah. No. I mean, that whole arena. I always think of the journey of having to do what we do as to find the thing that can keep us working when there's not a long format project happening, commercials, music videos, shooting stuff all the time or as much as possible, right? Because it's the whole practice of the craft and everything that you do, but
absolutely
it allowed you to play, and it allowed you to do things that you could take with you. And that kind of leads me to another spot that's really, to me, like sort of the emblem of your life, really, from where I stood, having worked in the lab myself. The world of cinematographers had not a large population of DPs that experimented photochemically. Colleagues of yours like Malik Saeed, Harris Savitas, Bob Richardson, Ellen Kuras, Darius Kanji. The list is not a huge and long list, but a list of people who were using photochemical techniques, some of which, in the case of Harris, he took from still, that would then lead the way to experimenting with skip bleach, cross-processing, photochemical techniques that were daring and sometimes risky, but with incredible photochemical results and incredible images that you were able to create and use in films. And you know, I go back to I know I've harped on this so many times, but those scenes in Inside Man, when you shot the interrogation scenes, they were shot on reversal, and then you cross-processed, but you also skipped the bleach on those and all of that, right? I mean, it was like the exposure range, the narrowness of what you needed to do to nail it was tiny, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, you know, before Inside Man, I had done a film called Gothica.
Gothica, exactly.
And,
well,
with Halle Berry, directed by Matthew Kassovitz. And, you know, back then, for me, when you test, you're testing everything. Like any idea you have, you test. And especially that was what was fun about the film days, is that, okay, I learned this from Ed Lachman, who is a mentor, friend, and a lifelong friend. He would do overs and unders so he could see if he could, like, how much you can get away with in the lows and how much you can get away with in the highs, right? And I that's where I start every test. At least back in the film days, I used to start every test with lows and highs, like underexposure and overexposure. Like how much can I get away with 3 stops over? How much can I get away with at 3 stops under, 4 stops under? And I would do one print where I would have him time it so that everything, just time it at one light, so we could see how dark it was, you know. But then I would do another print where I would print up, everything had to match the base to see what happened if I was 2 stops under and we brought it up. It was 2 stops over and brought it down. Obviously, you could expect results. You could expect contrast when you're overexposed. You could expect a milkiness when you're under, right?
Yeah.
But I was testing stuff like, you know, because I had shot Pi in the reversal, I was intrigued, and because Malik had shot Clockers in Ektachrome.
That's right.
I was on that movie. I was really interested in, okay, what if I did both? Or what if I cross-processed it and then bleach bypassed it?
Incredible.
And we at the test, when everybody was at the test on Gothica, people thought I was fucking out of my mind.
Yeah.
The studio was there. They're like, what the fuck are you thinking of doing? You know? And I mean, obviously I look at the thing and I'm like, Hallie looks like a ghost. And I'm like, I can't do this. But I wanted to see what it looked like. I just was, you know, unfortunately I had a whole room of people that didn't understand that I was just trying to test shit. But then I remembered, it's like like every time you do something on one thing that doesn't work, you could use it again. So when Spike said, you know, what can we do for this? You know, working with Spike, he's so brave about everything. You know, what do you want to do here? What do you want to do there? And I said, well, these interrogation scenes kind of float. You know, we don't know where they are in the linear telling of this story, right? I have an idea and I'm gonna show it to you, and we ended up doing that. And
there was massive overhead light, and it kind of became, and the image became kind of steamy looking, and really otherworldly. So different and so striking against the other stuff. It was amazing. Yeah.
Well, I have to say that, you know, what I had learned is that, you know, when you're dealing with, look, I also, like, I would listen to stories. Like, yeah, I'm a student of the game. You know, when I hear somebody who worked with Janusz Kaminski after doing, I'm trying to remember the film that he bypassed. I think it was his film. I think the one he directed. I'm thinking to myself, there are things that I can learn. And this is like reading American Cinematographer and being a geek about cinematography. You know, I knew that I had to flood the place with light. If I had shot that on regular negative, it would look flat as hell. But I knew I needed to give it some light.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that was incredible. And it was like this very sort of steamy looking image, but everything about it was so stark and so amazing looking and so fantasy looking. And
well, the contrast in color was given by the cross process. I mean, by the reversal, right? And but then the bleach bypass is what you're speaking to. The bleach bypass gave it that glow, that sort of silver retention glow, right?
Yeah, incredible.
But you know, the thing is, you know what's funny about that, man? When you talk about Harris and Darius and all, it all came from Storaro. He's the first guy who did E&R.
Storaro was the first guy who did E&R with the inventor Ernesto Novelli Rico at Technicolor Rome.
Right.
But that process, in all fairness, in its founding, was a safer process because it originated with a print process that they influenced the photochemically. You guys were playing with negative.
Yeah. Well, we didn't, you know, a lot of us couldn't afford at that stage. By the time the movie gets into post-production, and you know this, man, all of a sudden there's other voices that come into the equation. Yeah. So what you had planned, like workflow, it was a little different back then.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, you know, I mean, workflow is actually something to talk about in general. Like workflow is something to be established based on the intent. But it never, you know, it only happens with the people who know how to follow shit through all the way from beginning to end, right?
Right.
So I remember, here's another story. I remember I really wanted to do a kind of E&R type. What was Deluxe's version of it? I forgot the name of it.
It was called CCE, color contrast
right.
enhancement. That's what Darius used on David Fincher's Seven.
Right.
Yeah.
So I wanted to use it on Phone Booth.
Yeah. You wanted to use it which one?
On Phone Booth.
On Phone Booth with Joel Schumacher. Okay.
And I got to by the time I get to the end, I was told no by the studio, by Fox, that wasn't going to happen. But Beverly Wood, who I love, another great advocate like you, an advocate of our craft.
Yeah.
An ambassador too. And, she just, because she's a chemist, she just figured out a way to, give me a little bit of that effect without having Fox have to pay for it. She just found a chemical way to sort of, she won't tell me exactly. Maybe if I call her now, she'll tell me.
Yeah, not then.
Not back then. No. But it was cool. Like that's the thing. That's the beauty of labs back then was that you build a relationship, and it's just like, and they get you. When the lab got you, it was like, as a cinematographer, it was like the place. I'll never forget. I learned from the greats. It's like when you don't want to go to the office when you're prepping, you're like, I'm at the lab. Like.
So true, though. And then when you think about it, it's like, what you got a chance to do back then. I think about Ed as well, because when I think about Ed, and I think about even when I worked with Tak Fujimoto and what he said to me during a production, he knew that there was going to be a process to grind through it at the end, and there was a look that the director wanted, but Tak always said to me, it's in the negative. What I did is in the negative. And he was so confident about what he had and what he had built all the way through and the consistency that he had built. And I always think of when Ed did the film Far From Heaven for Todd Haynes, and you saw how the spectacular color palette in that film. I'm a geek about this as well, for sure, as you know, but when people see that and then you tell them, oh yeah, that was photochemical, that wasn't done digitally at all. Like, yeah. And people like look at you with their jaw dropped, like, how? And I'll tell you how. This is done by a cinematographer who understood every aspect of his pipeline, from the filter he put on his lens to the glass he used to the way in which he enabled light and what he did in the consistency of what he shot, and how he captured color through either time of day for exteriors or in control and interiors. And it was just absolutely spectacular. And once again, that saying still applies. It's in the negative, Yeah. And that's, to me, the magic, because right now we go to a world where we had to live through a bit of a bumpy ride at the beginning of digital capture. Obviously not anymore to that extent.
Right.
In terms of color science and all of that. You guys are constantly challenged. And it's funny, people say, well, cinematography has been taken over by digital technology. I totally disagree. Cinematography has been taken over by the creative artistry of cinematographers and people who work with them in post. It's shifted, but the craft is actually became more complex in many ways, not less.
Well, we have to each film, like I like to say, each film is custom made, and we have to redefine the workflow based on the movie. What is the thing to fight when you're at a level where you're dealing with companies, say studios, who want to streamline their workflow? I think that becomes a problem, because you lose the ability to make a custom made film, And workflow is something to pay attention to. The modern DP has to pay attention to workflow. You know, you need to figure out your lookup table. You need to track it through your dailies colorist, and then track it through and make sure it's implemented in your final colorist, right? Grain, when do you add, you just, you know, you got, it's just paying attention to it. And then there's the whole aspect of visual effects, right? That we have to pay attention to and be in a part of in post. Not that it takes up all our time, because, you know, if we're lucky, we're working on something else, but we have to pay attention, and because we have to be responsible for the visuals when the film is finished. You know what I mean? It's like there's so many things, there's more things to keep track of now than ever. And it's really, I wouldn't say it's a burden. It's just a responsibility.
Absolutely. You know? It's a big responsibility, and there's a lot of time spent on it. The old answer print process was weeks of work, one print after another until you nailed it. The DI process is a journey.
It is.
And
I got to open up, Charlie. It's a little dark. I'm looking at those little images. I got to open up.
Yeah. You got to open up. You got to open up.
There we go, baby.
Yeah,
let's get sort of a stop at a time.
Let me tell you, I always pre-light before, so I put a lamp near me, so I get that.
I use natural light, man. That's a new way.
Well, I like that better, but in my scenario, my living room.
Yeah, word. I get it.
So I want to wind the clock back when you met Darren, because I had forgotten. Like you know that I've known Darren since he was a student at Harvard. I worked on his first films when he was directing.
That's our connection, Charlie. That's our connection. That's how you and I met.
But you did a film with him at AFI that is one of the shorts that Darren made that I never saw, which became the basis for the name of his company, Protozoa. Yeah. And that was probably was it shot on 16 or 35? I've never seen it. Do you remember anything about it?
I'm not going to tell anything about what we shot on. It's embarrassing. But
it's embarrassing.
Well, I'll tell you what. Here's a bit of a story. You know, the way AFI works in your first year. First of all, I met Darren the first day. We're sitting in the front row. He was next to me, and I remember this other guy, Roberto Fonseca, and he was a Spanish director. And those are the people who were flanking me on each side, just by chance. You know what I mean? And we were there day one, and we were screening everybody's submission. This is crazy. They're screening everybody's submission to get into the school, right? And all my shit was on Super 8. Like, you know, but Darren's was on 16. And by far the most impressive piece of work of the entire class. I mean, talking about 28 directors, 28 cinematographers, 28 28 producers, right?
Did he show Supermarket Sweep?
That's exactly right.
He
showed a clip from Supermarket Sweep, which you had a part in. This is where the connection is.
I was involved on all of those early works.
This is where the connection is, right? So anyway, I was just like blown away by it. So smash cut forward, and you know, at AFI at the first year, at least at my year, you did 3 projects, right? And they called them cycle projects. In cycle 1, you had a limited group of people to choose from. And I was in a group. I ended up working with this woman who was very odd, Pamela Corky, who I loved. But I made a very whacked out, like a 50s fetishized homemaker movie. It was crazy. Like, she was totally bizarre, right? And I gravitated to the people who had the biggest ideas. But I love Darren, and I wanted to work, because we all have to, as cinematographers, we have to crew for other cinematographers. And I wanted to, Darren's DP asked me to operate. And Darren said no, because I didn't have enough experience. He wanted somebody with more experience. Yeah, no, this is a true story. So when it came to the second cycle, which was a director-driven cycle, and what that meant was the director could write the script and direct his script. And Darren asked me to do Protozoa. And when he came up to me, I said, well, I'm thinking about 2 other things, man. I'll get back to you. You know, And you know Eric Watson. You remember Eric Watson, the producer, right?
Of course.
Okay, so Eric was there too, because that's what Protozoa is. Basically him and, Eric, Darren, and loosely me, right? I mean, dude, it was like Eric came up to me one day in an ill-fitted suit, because that's how he was back then. And he was just like, yo, can I talk to you for a second? I'm like, yeah, man, what's up? He's like, Darren really wants you to make this, make our cycle project. He's like, what do you got going on? And I'm like, I got a couple things. Bullshit. It's like, you want to work with Darren, He's like, I'm still pissed at that motherfucker, for not letting me operate on his fucking movie. And Eric Watson convinced me, he's like, you're fucking being ridiculous. You're letting your pride get in the way. And then I ended up saying yes. And that's how I shot that film. And it was cool. Like, we hit it off. It's like, I knew we would. I was just pissed at it, thinking I was lesser than I was. I'm sorry for that beep. I don't know how to turn that shit off. I'm on a computer.
Yeah, no, it's hard. We get interference on these that come. I try to turn as much off as I can, but I get the same.
I apologize.
No worries. But Pi, really unusual process, shooting black and white reversal and ending up with a 35 print in the end that had to go through a whole series of iterations to make an interpositive or internegative in that case, because it was a reversal shot project and had to
Cineric.
be 35. Cineric did that. I had to go through Gufani, and it was a very a complex process, because you guys were shooting before Super 16 existed, and yet
But it was regular 16. It was regular.
That's what 16. I'm saying. It was regular. It was double perforated,
right.
Regular 16. Normally composed square for 4.3, but you composed for 1.85 in the end.
1.66.
Right? 1.66 to have a theatrical presentation, and you blew it up, and that whole process was quite a feat to get through to the end on that. Talk a little bit about how that worked out and what that was like, and shooting that and reviewing it and figuring out how to get to the end on that, because it really worked out amazingly in the end. But that was a hard process.
That film was the lessons from that movie have lasted with me to this day, and this is why. When I got to New York, Darren and Eric moved to New York about, maybe a year and a half before I got there. And they were prepping this film. And bugged out script like Darren does, And when we got there, we were prepping the movie. It's like just being a DP or a cinematographer, we didn't have time. We didn't have the crew. We didn't have the money to get gels to balance out color temperatures. Back then, you had to be really, if I was going to shoot color, it was going to be, gelling windows or bringing in HMIs. It wasn't like we had LEDs. Kino wasn't even really a possibility for us at that time, because it wasn't readily available yet. It was when Kino flows were starting to move into the forefront before pre-LED and post-tungsten. So I literally shipped over a Home Depot set of lights to get there. I built lights that I could use because I knew that I wasn't going to have anything. And we were able to get from Broadway stages Luna lighting in the great borough of Queens, Long Island City. We were able to get a small package, and my biggest light was a 2K. And we knew we had limitations, and I knew we had limitations, so we talked about black and white, right? But not until we saw Let's Get Lost by Bruce Weber.
Yeah, great film.
Great film, processed at the great old sorely missed Bono Labs.
Bono Labs.
Remember them? Right. And we wanted to do that. We realized, okay,
Matty,
we went black and white.
your audio is a little fractured coming in. It's a little. Is it? Are you talking through the computer or through your earphones? Through your earphones.
My earphones. Let me just check that out real quick.
Yeah, the audio. I just want to make sure I get clean audio. Sorry to interrupt you, bro.
No. I'm just maybe I got to switch to a different.
If you go to computer audio, which is what I'm using, you're on a laptop, right? Or are you on a phone?
Yeah, I'm on a laptop.
Yeah, just go to computer audio. I'm starting to hear a little bit of whatever it is, and I don't know if it's because it's coming through is it through the Bluetooth or something? I don't know.
Yeah, it's through Bluetooth.
Yeah, let's go computer audio. Sorry.
Okay.
Give me a little technical direction. We'll skip right back to our story about working with. Yeah, go ahead.
How's that sound?
That sounds awesome. Now I hear you perfectly.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah.
What I was saying was that what I learned from that film was that the limitations, the box that was created for us, made us make creative decisions. Like, how could we take what we didn't have and make it something we do have, right? We chose black and white because we didn't have the ability to, control color temperature. But then we chose reversal after being inspired by Let's Get Lost in a film called Colorado Cowboy by Arthur Elgort. Those films made us realize that we could shoot reversal. Did I know how to shoot reversal? Hell no. And I was still young. I mean, I was, 26.
It was low light sensitivity, was it not? You were working with a low ASA at that time on that reversal, or I don't know though. You tell me.
We mixed it between Tri-X and Plus X.
Mm-hmm.
The Plus X was cleaner, the Tri-X was grainier, and the Tri-X was like more volatile to me, in terms of artificial light, because we used Tri-X when we were inside. And literally, I had a collection of like MR16s and Part 20s and small globes that I put in Home Depot lights that I was lighting Max's apartment with. So it was all hard light here and there. And I wasn't really, as I was doing incident readings at the time. I've since transitioned to all reflective. But what was interesting about that is, I had a hardware store lighting kit, and I had reversal film, and the results are what they are because, and it's stylized that way because we knew we didn't have something. There's a lot we didn't have, but we wanted to stylize. Darren and I have always wanted to stylize every movie in some certain way, but we always applied our technique. Coming up from AFI, we've always tried to apply the technique that we've decided on appropriately to each narrative. And then
the next film is this incredible production, Requiem for a Dream, and that's like absolutely a greater budgeted project with lots of visual challenges, certainly limitations, I'm sure, with budget, but a lot more on hand to be able to do what you needed to do, and absolutely stunning looking with great effects and beautiful film.
Well, one, thank you. But we were young. We put a lot of sugar in the coffee about it. There was a lot going on. And we, things that I had learned, things that I had been inspired by and Darren too, by things we've seen in short form music videos, things that people were doing, techniques like the motion control stuff we did, and the even carrying over the Snorri cam over from Pi to Requiem and having each character sort of have a shot that sort of signified that a moment of importance. And then just applying a language of color temperature and general hue in the terms of seasons. Like if the film is marketed by it starts in summer, transitions to fall, and goes in the winter. You know what I mean? We gave a hue and a general feeling to each one of those things, and it was a perfect storm of ideas, really. And we were at an even at a young age, we had found that we want to apply our techniques appropriately. So there's a lot of that shit going on. And, from a geek standpoint, I had, between Pi and Requiem, I had discovered the ability of reflective reading. So that changed everything. you know. But you know, another film, I did a film called Saturn, which is now called Speed of Life, I think, out there in the world. But it was a film that was directed by a classmate of ours, Rob Schmidt, and it was in New York. It was when Brooklyn was Brooklyn, and when you went to Grand or Metropolitan in Williamsburg, it smelled like oil. You know what I mean? You know, and then it was like, and we shot in a warehouse full of rats. And the production designer, the same guy who ended up doing Requiem for a Dream, James Chinlin, great, amazing production designer. And he built this geodesic dome, you know, inside this warehouse space. And I had discovered Chungking Express. You know what I mean? And I was inspired by the naturalism of it. And then that was a jumping off point for me. And I took that experience into Requiem for a Dream.
And then you did a whole bunch of stuff with Darren. We'll go on to that after. But then you collided with Spike. Talk about your first time working with Spike Lee and how that came to be, and your first film.
You know, it's funny. When I got a call, I used to have this joke with my agent at the time. Like every time she said, "Guess who called?" I would always say David Lynch, and she's like, "No, it wasn't David Lynch." And then one day she calls and she said, "Guess who called?" It's like David Lynch. She's like, "Spike Lee." I'm like, "What?" You're kidding me. He's like, "No, Spike Lee wants to meet you tomorrow." I'm like, "Tomorrow?" He's like, "I'm sending you the script now." And back then it wasn't email. It was, it was a paper script delivered to the house, and I read it. I just sat there laying on the floor reading the script, and like, I don't care what the script is. I'm going to like it, period. Right? It was a film called She Hate Me. So I meet Spike. Yeah. And I meet Spike, and I'm like, I had this experience, and I had this experience meeting Billy Friedkin before that. I met him for a movie that he was doing, and obviously Billy Friedkin was a hero, but there was like, there was stuff that I had heard how he treated a good friend of mine, Derek Walsky, on his previous film, and I was just like, I don't know if I can deal with this kind of scenario. I'm just not ready for that. I'm not ready for constant criticism, and I'm not ready for that kind of volatility. And so I was like, but I was prepared. Like that taught me something going into my Spike meeting, because Spike is a hero, is that like, you can't deify a person you're meeting with. You gotta, you're walking in as a collaborator. You're not walking in as a fan, So I walked in to a meeting, and he couldn't be more cool. And just talking to him, and, I could have spent 2 hours talking about the New York Knicks, you know what I mean? Like, and it was just like, it was really fluid, very easy. And I never felt any pressure from him. Like, his personality, even though, he is such a large personality in our world, pop culturally, he couldn't be more cool. Right. And we ended up making a film together and then building a relationship. And I'm really, really happy to call him a friend.
And he gave you the ability to kind of, in your years of doing stuff together, he gave you the ability to kind of be the creative, take it home, supervising the look, right? I mean, he there was a real secondhand, a real trust.
Well, you know what I realized about him, and like before I met him, I had already met Malik. I shot a commercial for Malik, and then I ended up making a film with Ernest.
Right, with Ernest Dickerson.
Die Alone.
Yeah.
With DMX. So I had some experience around people who've been around him, So, and I knew from both those guys, they're fearless. Both Ernest and Malik are fearless cinematographers. And, their influences go far beyond commercial filmmaking. You know what I mean? So, just being around Malik and being around Ernest, I felt I knew that Spike was going to support ideas. And when we made She Hate Me, of course, I was in reverence to whatever he wanted to do with the camera. If he wanted to use 3 cameras for a scene, let's use 3 cameras for a scene. If you want to use 1 camera for a scene, we're going to use 1 camera for a scene. But I was also, I knew that he respected the craft. and he does. He respects the craft of cinematography. He's an encyclopedia of film, and he respects that craft and what it brings to each and every one of his ventures. So I knew that, and that gave me comfort and made me comfortable around him. And it was really, you know, I can't say enough. It's like working and collaborating with the guy who actually inspired you to actually get into the business was bananas, you know?
Exactly.
But then we made Inside Man after that, and it was just like we were on par. We were like, you know, two collaborators.
Exactly right. Yeah. And during this whole stream of films with both of them, you had the chance to do several films with Joel Schumacher. How did that relationship ignite, and how did that happen?
I love Joel. You know, he
Character. Yeah.
On the Power of Pi, he asked me to do a film called Tigerland. On the Power of Pi. You know, and it just, when you work with somebody who has been around so long, there's no, you know, it has no fear. You know, no fear at all. Like, it was the first time I ever saw somebody just cross shit off a script and said, we don't need this. You know what? Cut these two lines out, and we're gonna do this. I mean, he was just like fluid. You know, making the movie and just making decisions and being the boss. Nobody was telling him what to do. You know, I was just like, I was astounded. I'm like, I've never seen anything like that. And I mean, honestly, man, he's like right up there for me in my career about people who I respect the most. Because, you know, he not only has he seen everything, he'll never tell a story that's inappropriate to, you know, to disparage anybody. One. Two, he never tells the same story twice. Every time he tells a story, it's a new one you've never heard before, because the guy has so many goddamn stories to tell, you know, about what he's been through. So as a filmmaker, you know, he's a different kind. He's a different cat. Like, he really, you know, he wants to get. He always just say to me, he's like, let's get the meat and potatoes, and then we can start to play. And he kind of taught me the idea that you need to be malleable as a cinematographer, because, like, you know, when we're taught as DPs, we're going to shoot the wide shot first, and then we're going to go into coverage. And it's an old school way of working, and I don't know who works that way anymore, right? But Joel's like, he just had, like, he changed the way he worked based on the project. He was the most malleable man I ever met. You know what I mean? He didn't have a set way. Like, he was different on Tigerland, he was different on Number 23, and he was different on Phone Booth. He was as malleable as a cinematographer. And I think it comes from the fact that he actually was a crew member.
Yeah, he
was.
As
a costume designer, as an art director.
That's right.
You know what I mean? As a writer, as a director, he's done different shit. Like, he's done it in different ways. He just knows how DP thinks and works, and, like, you know. I mean, he brought Andrei Barkoviak out, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So, and Andrei's fucking amazing. Like, he brought Andrei Barkoviak into the American cinematic world.
Yeah.
Like, you got to give this dude credit. He took chances from day one, right? And I don't think he gets enough respect. But I do. I love the man.
No, great man, wonderful man. I have spent long periods with him over the years at our old stomping ground in Poland, where
Wisdom, the whole idea of wisdom. I remember that. Remember that when him and Barkoviak were on that panel? I was sitting in the audience.
Yeah.
And I was just I love seeing it, because I'm watching cinematic history.
It's what it is. Exactly right.
The problem is, you know, I'll tell you that, Charlie, I'm going to have one complaint.
What's that?
There was snobbery in that crowd.
There was.
You know what I mean? Well, I mean, just in sense, it's like everybody's like, you know, I love international films, and that's what I love about that festival, right? But give some fucking respect to the man that brought you, like, Lost Boys, right? Falling Down.
Right on.
You know what I mean? It's like, give some fucking respect to the man who's been through everything.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, I just didn't feel that. that
Camry Mush did that. Yeah, yeah.
I just didn't feel it.
And you've done this wonderful career choice that I think is so important as a part of who you are as a cinematographer throughout your career, to go from a fairly super high, well, these super high budgets of the Favreau films that you've done, to then going and doing like a film like Native Son, which is a lower budget independent film. And you go back and forth and do that, and you've been able to make those choices, and you continue to make those choices. Obviously, we all work for the opportunity to balance out what we're going to make on our projects, but you've always offered yourself out to lower budget projects, even in recent years in your career, and that's sort of been a choice, right?
It's been a choice the whole time. I mean, I patterned my career. Early on, I said I want to be like Ed. You know what I mean?
Right, like Ed Lachman.
I want to be like Ed Lachman. I want to be able to gravitate from country to country. I want to be able to gravitate from budget to budget and story to story. And he's not only a friend but a hero, like Spike. And and Owen Roizman, the great Owen Roizman, like just his diversity. You know what I mean? He's not always looking to do the same goddamn thing.
Right.
I don't want to do the same goddamn thing. You know what I mean?
And we talked a little bit about this with Ed. Ed was sort of the mentor for so many DPs and so many great cinematographers that have come out since on their own. Talk a little bit about the time you spent having the opportunity to work under him, right, at a certain points, right, or with him, correct?
Oh yeah. Hey Charlie, can we take one break? I gotta take a piss.
Go take a piss.
Yo,
we're back.
My man.
Coffee back.
Say, I remember the question. It's about working with Ed
working with Ed, and also in a sense because Ed's career spans a lot of directors and a lot of artists that he's worked with, but he's been sort of kind of the foundation for a lot of careers for cinematographers. I liken him to what D.D. Allen was in editing. I mean, if you worked for D.D. Allen at some point in your career, after years of going under that apprenticeship and working as an assistant, you had a toolbox to go ahead and kind of really launch a career of your own. I mean, not that was your relationship with Ed, but it was his relationship with many DPs.
Right. Well, I mean, there's a tree that he's created of people who worked with him on his crews that become cinematographers. Myself, Richard Wachowski, Stefan Chopsky, Tom Siegel.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people. There's a lot of people, and there's more. I'm missing some people right now, but I mean, honestly, nobody. I remember I was at AFI actually. It was my second year. And in the second year of AFI, you're basically making your thesis film. There's not a whole lot of instruction, and it's pretty fluid. But I got a call to do some work, and Richard Wachowski, who was his focus puller at the time, called me and said, "Hey, I want to introduce you to Ed Lachman." And I knew a little bit about him, but as I got to know him, I couldn't. It was unbelievable what the man had already done at that time. I mean, I'm 21 years old, 22 years old, and the guy had already accomplished so much. Werner Herzog, for example.
Yeah.
Lesson Zero. You know what I mean? Like, he'd done stuff that was just, he hadn't really gotten credit for. And it was before cinematographers really, noticed by general public, right? And but he's like, God, he's just really, I can't say enough about him. Like, he's for those of anyone who views this that doesn't know, go watch as many films that Ed Lachman shot as you can, and you watch the mastery of this man, and watch his evolution, because he also evolves. Like, you watch Lesson Zero, and then you watch something like The Limey. The fucking Limey is incredible. Like, yeah. And then you watch Far From Heaven, like you said,
incredible.
Carol. You know, like were you there? Remember when we were at Camera Image and he won for Carol?
Yeah, and
I cried, dude. I don't know about you, but I cried. I was like,
beautiful, and you know, when I look at that film and the shots through the windshield and the lights coming towards the through the windshield into the lens, and all of the play that he did, and the feeling of what the moment was like, everything about what he was capturing made you feel like you were in the moment. You were in the car, you were driving. I mean, it was just beautiful, you know. Yeah,
he's one of the most emotionally intelligent cinematographers I ever met in my life.
And a guy who keeps what I would call a photo principle, and photography, cinematography, photochemistry, every aspect of knowing the possibilities and what can be done. He was constantly upping his game throughout his career, always and then when he speaks about the effect of it, even when he would talk about the effect and the reasons, like I remember when we were going through the transition to digital capture, and he was talking about what film meant to him. Because I remember when I worked with Keanu, when we did Side by Side, there was that whole sort of leave film behind movement that kind of faded actually in recent years with film coming back. But the idea of what the emotional experience of seeing a film and what the photochemical process and what the process of seeing projected film did for people going to a movie, and he just dove into wanting to really capture in what he would describe as what the difference was and what it really meant, even for everything that would ultimately be shown digitally, what the difference was to have something captured on negative and what negative meant. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting too. I mean, you know, we talk about a person like Harris who underexposed, like, famously underexposed.
It was. I remember being there when we were working with him and seeing how far down he would go to create to change and lower the contrast. I mean, it was incredible.
Well, Ed doesn't do that. Like Ed would, whatever a midlight would be, you know. At a certain point, a midlight, and this is going to be an esoteric conversation for people who don't know.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, it used to be a 35, right?
Right.
But then it became a 40. At some point, stocks changed and whatever changed, and all of a sudden 40 kind of became a midlight. I don't know why. I don't know how. You know, I don't know if Bass changed or what. But Ed would always overexpose. It was the way he did it. But his results were always different. And he went about it the same way as a technician, right? He knew what he was doing based on the way he did it differently. Like I do it differently than him, based on because I love experimentation, and I was inspired by Harris too, and I'm inspired by Ed. But like Ed would religiously overexpose, right, and bring it down.
Right.
But he knew. If he wanted something soft, he knew how to make it soft based on lighting, filtration, but he was always going to give that negative a certain weight, right? Whereas like Lance Accord and Harris Savides, these guys are going to give it like, they're going to make it as thin as fuck. And I'm sure, and Gordon probably was the godfather of that, no pun intended, you know what I mean? Like of making a negative thin. You know what I'm saying?
Right. I mean, the principles were that our RGB lights were between 0 and 60, and the old idea that the middle was 30 or 25. You know, you had range going up and down and stops, and it was definitely the rule of thumb.
You're dating yourself right now. You just said 25. I mean, I know what you're saying. When I was in school, 25 was the midlight.
25 across. That was
right. 25 across. But by the time I was a professional, by the time I got paid to do this, it was 30-something, in the 30s.
Right.
How'd that shit happen? You know what I mean? That was crazy, man. I have to say, it's like nobody talks about that, and I guess it's not really important right now. But like, technology changed.
It had a little bit to do with what the labs decided to do against the manufacturers. It wasn't just about Kodak. It was,
Right.
I mean, unfortunately, it was a bit of a game, but Kodak set standards according to their own photochemical idea and their own control. And
Right.
then when labs decided to play around, they changed what the middle was. But
right.
Agreed. But the middle was important because range is important.
Yeah.
But all of this stuff are principles that, as I talk to a guy like Ed as a great example, when he talks about shooting and talking to the lab and asking for his lights, and then now working with labs that are not printing anymore and don't have an analyzer. He was ranting at me just this past December about how he would send film into the current lab that's here in New York that wasn't putting the negative on the analyzer. He's saying, how can I process negative and not know my exposure range from the lights, regardless of whether or not I'm printing?
Right.
And he was going a little nuts on him and saying, I'll get you an analyzer. I own one, which he actually, ironically,
he does, yeah.
Bought all the machines from the last lab in New York that I worked for.
It's a very Ed thing to do.
Yeah, he was so crazy. It was wonderful.
But dude, like, you got that poster over your right shoulder, Black Swan, right?
Black Swan, baby.
I said, I begged Joey V, who was already retired. I think, Joey, if you could do me one favor, and I don't want to print. If you could just read my negative on an analyzer for me and tell me what my lights are after I test, I'd be really appreciative. And you know what? He fucking did it.
That's right.
You know, he did it. He came back into town, read the shit on an analyzer, and like, I mean, that was like, that's what I'm talking about. I said that relationship with the lab was something really precious. Like we had a bond that was beyond. Like, directors were part of it too, but nobody else. Nobody.
Yeah,
else.
but there was no version of Video Village when you shot film where they were looking at something with whatever base LUT applied, allowed them to see what was getting captured. There was a shorthand, and you were able to be a magician when there was film, when the film came back.
Yeah, the alchemy.
That's what it was, man.
Yeah,
we missed the alchemy. What the process was, and for me, we continue on with advancements in technology, and thank God we do have great tools and great capabilities to be able to do what we want to do, working with great colorists like we've worked with and like you've worked with over the years, my old colleague Tim, and of course the people that you've worked with over at any of the various facilities that you've been with over the years. And
like Tim Stippen was amazing, Joe Galler's amazing, Stefan Sonnenfeld's amazing, Steve Scott's amazing, Mitch Paulson's amazing. I mean, there's a shit ton, and there's Tom Poole. There's like, dude, we got superstars.
And they become your collaborators in a way that the lab timer was not at the same level of the detail of the journey.
I disagree. Chris Regan was my favorite color timer back in the day. He was at Deluxe. Chris Regan, he's a great color timer. Loved him. And then there's Lee Weimer at Technicolor.
Yeah.
And I mean, we did the same shit. Like, no, we couldn't isolate shit. But dude, like, if you put any of the colors we just talked about, bless them, they're fucking talented, and sat there and we didn't get to stop shit and look at it.
Yeah.
And we just talked about, points of magenta and points of, I mean, that was an art form.
Yeah, you talked about how to implement all of your color and range changes, and
that's when we used to match cuts.
Yeah,
that's when we used to match cuts, because that's how we used to watch it. We used to watch it straight through, and we were just talking about how cuts would match, right? That was basically everything was embedded. We shot things more precisely.
Exactly. That's what I'm talking about.
We shot things more precisely, and then we would just match cuts.
Going back to the same statement I made before with my favorite conversation with Tak when I worked with him on
in the negative.
In the negative, dude. Don't talk to me. Don't talk to me. And if HBO wants to do something, tell them to have fun. They've got all the range they need. And I love that.
You know, people probably wouldn't say this, but one of my favorite films in cinematography was Devil in a Blue Dress, which he shot, and it was a master class. And like it's like he didn't, you know, he probably didn't connect with the culture of the time. Probably didn't connect with the time. Tak Fujimoto killed that movie. Watch it; it stands the test of time. Watch Devil in a Blue Dress. It stands the test of time. Like he invoked people like Chris Menzies and fucking Jack Cardiff and fucking Peter Bijou, all the way to Roger Deakins. Like the guy is, he killed that movie. There's not one mistake in it from a lighting standpoint.
And for cinematography, what is I mean, we can never really say, because we have so many, what our favorite moments and our favorite cinematography work, not even just cinematographers, but work that we've seen. What has blown your mind over the years that you go back to and say, God, that was an inspiration for me?
That I could watch over and over again?
Yeah.
Road to Perdition. Road to Connie Hall. And I was going to say this when we were talking about Ed. Like, Ed is an unsung Connie Hall. He really is. Like, Connie did American Beauty. Towards the end, he did American Beauty and Road to Perdition, right? Ed's the same way. Like, he just reinvents himself, masters his craft, and he's mastered his craft. He's a master. Like, that title doesn't go to many people. He's an absolute master, right? And Connie was an absolute master. You know, I think about movies that just blow me away every time, and that's one that blows me away all the time, from a lighting standpoint and light quality standpoint and the quality of light standpoint. But it's hard to say. You know, there's a lot of people I appreciate right now. I love Bradford. I love what Bradford does. I love what Greg Fraser does. Like people who are maybe half a generation behind me, right? They love what they do. Love what they do. And then there's always, I love everything Chris does, like Doyle. I love everything Chris does.
Yeah.
And Harris is a genius. Harris and Jean-Yves Escoffier are in a special category for me. I don't know if you ever worked with Jean-Yves, but Jean-Yves.
Both Jean-Yves and the late Jean-Yves and the late Harris Savitas were both who passed through my way.
Yeah. I mean, it gives me chills. Their work is fucking phenomenal. And of course, Darius and Derek, you know, Daruis. Both of them.
And also, one it's interesting, you know, with Kaminsky, he had so many things that were done constantly with Spielberg or the same directors. But then when he did Diving Bell with Julian, right. Oh my God, what a beautiful thing to watch with variable shutter and the image of capturing eyesight for the main character. Brilliant. Beautifully done, right?
I'm going to say, I mean, Janusz doesn't get enough credit for being as inventive as he is. And Janusz, and I want to just shout out to Chivo and Rodrigo as well. You know, those guys, God, I love them. And then, I like that, you know, in my mind, like my generation, it's like me and Rodrigo, and it's Seamus, and it's Alvin Kutchler. You know, these guys, I love these dudes. It's like they bring it. You know what I mean? Every time. And I love Ellen. You know, Ellen's just like
great.
It's just like there's so many cinematographers I appreciate. I just follow. You know, as a fan of them. You know, it's just everybody's pushing the fucking craft forward. That's what we do. You know, that's what we do. You know, and now you got Rachel and you got Reed and Reed's directing now, but you got these people like, you know, I love Natasha Briere, and I love her and like what she does. It's like the image and the kid and Chase Urban who did Spice movie. Like there's a bunch of people I really really love.
coming up.
And, yeah, younger and older, and at my age, I'm like, I mean, the craft is like, dude, we are vibrant, man. We got a deep bench.
We have a deep bench. No, we really do. The work that you did with Bradley Cooper on Star is Born. Talk a little bit about the scenes that you shot when they're going on stage and the lights coming right at you. Those scenes are just magical. And how you handled that was how you handled those shots and those scenes and how you did that. That was so beautiful.
You know, the funny thing is we had to figure out a language of the light for the stage stuff, because we started at Coachella, where we were given a stage that already had lighting. So we had to evaluate what they had and use what we needed to use. And then, and that was day stuff, so it wasn't as important. But then we had to mix it in with some night stuff when we shot at Coachella, and some night stuff when we shot at Stagecoach. And then we also, you know, Bradley and I went to probably the greatest music festival in the world, Glastonbury. And that also was just like, you know, found footage. Really, it's just like it was an atmosphere. But so for us, it was like it's just sort of engineering what we did artificially to fit within what we knew we were going to be involved in. So it was hard because, you know, Bradley had this idea, rightly so, to put the camera on stage only, because it was really a subjective experience between Jack Maine and Allie, right? And those two characters, it had to be subjective to them, so that there was no need for an angle from an audience point of view.
Right. You were on stage with them. You were with them while they were performing.
So Matt, but to design a stage and to communicate to the crew, we had to design a sort of a lighting concept that would work in a proscenium sense, because that's how everybody thinks. And then really, like, it was about lowering the lights, so the lights would be in this shot when we got down, because we knew where the camera was going to be. So it was like a two-step process of actually designing the lighting rigs of each stage and each performance from a view that we'll never see in the movie. And then augmenting it and doing a second draft where we would lower the lights so that we knew that those lights would be in the shot when we photographed the actors. So that was it was kind of a, you know, but that, you know, that goes to prep, that goes to like experience, that goes to like, you know, understanding how your crew thinks and understanding where the camera's going to be and being able to articulate those things and just being patient with trying to create those things. If that makes any sense. It's just, I knew I wasn't going to sit there and tell a long story to my dimmer board operator or my rigging grip and gaffer about where the camera was going to be. And I didn't want to anticipate that. I just wanted to design something as if the audience was going to see it and it was going to be, give me some variety and give a good, like, authentic live show, but then lower those lights so that they hit the lens.
Right, because the vibe was so much like, you know, you're almost a character on stage when you're shooting. You're in there. You're in the scene.
I felt like I was in the band.
Literally like you're in the band. Yeah.
I felt like I was in the band. It was amazing. Amazing experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And so recently you wrapped a project that I'm less familiar with. The last stuff that you shot, which was this film Birds of Prey. I didn't get a chance to see it. Talk a little bit about that.
You know, Birds of Prey was I wanted to work with this director who Kathy Yan. She had made a film called Dead Pigs, which was like I thought was superbly crafted in terms of multiple characters within the same film, all coming together at the end, and there was a payoff. It was a well-written script, but it was really well directed, and the cinematography was stellar, and appropriate for the screenplay. And I, you know, sometimes I'm maybe I'm not like the other guys. I like that spectacle of the big movie the big stupid like entertainment movie, the popcorn movie, and who doesn't love Margot Robbie, you know, and want to be around Margot Robbie? So like it's the same thing with Venom. Like when I was in the DI for Mother, which is a polar opposite from Venom.
Absolutely. And
I'm meeting, and I wanted to make a Venom. Like I had missed my work with, I missed Jon Favreau. I missed that big superhero movie, and I wanted to get back to it just because I did enjoy it as a person, you know. And the same way I yearn to go back to something small, sometimes I yearn to go back to something big, you know.
Right.
It's not as emotional for me, but it satisfies another part of me and who I am. Like that I love that spectacle. I love the fact that it may have the potential to reach a huge audience, and I like that. You know, I have no. Maybe they step outside of the realm of art. You know, but
we would be remiss if with this poster hanging over my head, we didn't talk once about Black Swan. So we should talk.
We did.
Well, a little bit, but in terms of what that experience was like, I mean, you were shooting 16 and really crafting something that involved a lot of movement, and it was so elegant and so crisp and so beautiful. And talk a little bit about the making of Black Swan and what that was like for you to do that film.
It was a perfect time in our collaboration, really, because we had taken a break from each other on The Wrestler, as you know, and The Fountain was a really hard movie, and there was a lot going on in my life, and there was a lot going on in his life. And admittedly, we didn't get along so well. And The Wrestler was a good break, and he was able to reinvent himself from the box office failures of The Fountain. Although both of us love that movie, you know, and I love that movie. But I get a call from Rachel Weisz, who was Darren's partner at the time, and she's like, "I want you to come to Darren's surprise 40th birthday party." And I was like, "Oh, cool." So I fly out there, and I hang out in New York for a bit. And after his birthday party, he was surprised I was there. They wanted me to roast him, but I just didn't, we were at a place where I'm not going to roast this kid right now. I'm not going to do that. But I was just I was just there. I wanted to be there for him for his birthday. And, that week we walked around Manhattan together, like the old days. We just literally walked around Manhattan in the old days, and we were talking about Black Swan. And we were in a good place. We were both older than we were when last time we saw each other and worked together. So it was free, and it was a script that was like, it could have easily gone wrong, really, Charlie. It could have been, that could have been like a disaster of genre. You know what I mean?
Right on.
Thriller. But, I don't trust anybody. I mean, I trust Spike. I trust Darren. Like, even if I have doubts about something that's in the screenplay, I trust them to fix it, right? And I'm looking at the script and I'm thinking this could easily be something that's just like a genre movie that anybody can make. But I know that Darren's going to do something, right? He's going to have a plan for it. And then we just had to open, like we went back to who we were when we were younger, but we were older people, and it was cool. So I guess what I'm saying is, when I made the film, I had no pressure. I didn't put any pressure on myself. It wasn't heavy lifting. It's like I took what we got. It's like that old saying of stay within yourself. That's all I did, and I learned some shit from that. That's why I started to understand how to mix color before LEDs. We shot at SUNY Purchase for a lot of the performances, and we didn't have the money to change the lighting. Like, I was going to use what they had, and I just picked and choose what we were going to use and what we weren't going to use. And then I just came up with an idea that we would gel some, we had cyc strips. And if anybody out there who listens to this knows what a cyc strip is, it's basically 1K tungsten lights on a 12 strip. So you got 12,000 watts of light. with 1K each on 12 different little channels, right? So I said, well, if we wire them in a certain way so we can control them, then why don't we do a red, a green, a white, a red, a green, and white. And we just said offset it all. And then I'd start mixing color. And then most of those performances you see at the end in the third act, that's how it was done. I didn't put a lot of pressure on myself because I was just paying attention to, I was paying more attention to Darren. I was paying more attention to Natalie. I was less of a, I kind of grew there, you know. I stopped being a DP solely, and I started paying attention to other shit.
Cool. And you know, it's interesting. I remember being at the premiere for Mother, which I was already out of being in the post world at that point, but I had worked on you know, certainly on a whole bunch of stuff for Darren along those years. And it occurred to me, even though I've never talked about it with Darren directly, that Mother was sort of part of a trilogy in a sense. And I don't know if this was ever discussed story-wise, but if you think about Requiem, Black Swan, and Mother, there's the thread.
Yeah.
Isn't there? I mean, it's kind of weird, but there's a thread of some type of, you know, in Requiem you have the is it the Ellen Burstyn, right? The mother, right? And then in Black Swan you have the mother was played by, I forget who played it was
Barbara Hershey.
Barbara Hershey, right? And then we get, you know, to Mother, and you're dealing with different aspects of some common thread. It's fascinating that I ended up watching Mother twice because I went to the premiere both in Toronto and in New York, and really lynched onto it in the second screening. It's like, oh, I see what he wanted to do here, and how he wanted to reach the audience. He was very funny when he would introduce it, because he would always say, you know, you may not like me after you watch this. You always start that way.
Yeah.
Very funny. And I thought it was wonderful. It was like, because he acknowledged that he had made a film that was going to be very challenging for people to watch.
Yeah.
Such an incredible achievement.
You know, he's he's enigmatic, to say the least. You know what I mean? You know, and you know him personally. And he's pretty much a normal guy, right?
Yeah.
But his ideas are, special. You know what I mean? He's a very unique person, the way he thinks. And like, we've always had high goals for ourselves in our lives in terms of how we went about our careers.
Well, when I go back to Requiem, and I think about that time, I think around that time that Requiem was out, the movie, I think it was the movie Traffic that came out. And,
oh, yeah.
Right? Okay. And I remember going to Requiem and walking out, and it was almost like what I experienced when I left Oliver Stone's The Doors. I felt like I had been on a drug trip. It was so immersive, right?
Right.
Does that?
That's a good word, Dan. That's a good way to put it. It was immersive. It brought you into the language and atmosphere of the movie, right? And that's all we've ever tried to do, is do that. Like, that's all we've ever tried to do. Like, what I do is not just light, it's just trying to create an atmosphere. And light services the atmosphere. You know, I'm not trying to beautify anything. And I learned that, we've learned all that shit together, to be honest with you. We've learned all that shit together. And I appreciate that. That's why I stop everything for him.
Yeah. Incredible life, man. We're lucky folks, but.
Well, we've also known each other for so goddamn long, you know.
That's so true. So many years. We
could actually sit there and go, oh, remember that time? You know, it's incredible. Like, how did it happen? How did we get here? How come it went so fast?
How come it went so fast? Exactly. Well, Matty, I think we've covered the gamut. I don't think we've missed too much, unless there's something that I missed. But this has been absolutely wonderful, brother.
No, bro. It was great talking to you. Like I said, you are the perfect person to do this. You're perfect person. When I heard about this shit, I was like, I want to be a part of it. Like, Charlie, what the hell? It's like, what about me? I want to be in. I'm in.
Thank you so much. And you know, stay close, stay safe. I love
too.
you. And I look forward to the moment where we can all be in the same room together again soon.
Amen. Amen. Hopefully.
Love
Hopefully
you, brother.
tune in later.
Talk to you, man.
All right, brother. Be good.
Thank you.
Good. Ciao.